Nyan je chembur to the new me jang, zoner monum chembur ngam jata, bakar tangam santo, shermato. Stumba tirje janla ki jom sar, ne chen rover chen ni chen kam san. Yawar tiji yel shen lo yelarman, jume panzo jala sorando, gongje to bampur, shinji lo.
The supreme, profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it, may we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Today we begin our discussion on the chapter of craving. Earlier, in the Tibetan text, did we not finish reciting it? Sentient beings, due to delusion, destroy themselves and view extreme attachment as pure. Desire and craving continue to grow, binding themselves and making liberation difficult. With this, we begin our teaching on the chapter of craving. Because earlier, we have already provided a general explanation of the various faults that are associated with desire. If we follow after desire, we will not attain liberation. Here, it is explained in detail and separately. Actually, it's true that these two names are slightly different from each other, but in reality they are essentially just different perspectives on desire, which are used for the purpose of analysis. So this chapter of craving, this idea can actually be included in the discussion from the first chapter. In that chapter, we already focused on analyzing the process of how attachment arises, not just toward other people, but also toward inanimate objects, and have already discussed the major faults of this. As you will see, what follows is much the same, whether it is toward people or toward things. Any attachment that arises in our continuum, if this problem is not completely and thoroughly eliminated, it will inevitably bring about immense suffering to all sentient beings. So, what does this statement truly mean? All sentient beings in the world, because of attachment, give rise to delusions. After these delusions arise, there are all kinds of discriminations and improper mental engagements. These are unreasonable discriminative thoughts. As a result, they end up being destroyed by them. Whether it is a person or an animal, in fact, many sentient beings are ruined by attachment, destroying their entire lives. So what is the main reason for this? Actually, when it comes to attachment, if the attachment is extremely strong and not counteracted, this attachment causes one to perceive the specific object of desire, regardless of its color, its shape, or even its fundamental nature, as being exceptionally good, as pure, beautiful, and magnificent. Such an inverted discriminative thought. In today's world, if you have this kind of inverted discriminative thought, people in the world call it cognitive distortion. Their entire perception does not actually correspond to reality. This kind of perception is completely upside down, and they consistently operate based on it. Then this mindset creates a self-perpetuating vicious cycle, and over time, it gradually becomes so ingrained that it feels like second nature. In this way, desire keeps growing stronger and stronger. For example, if you think a person or a thing is considered to be extremely good and very important, then your resulting attachment cannot be easily or effectively counteracted, and it just keeps increasing. This includes some Buddhists and practitioners who may indeed still have these growing desires even as they get older, whether it is in a particular monastery or in a particular retreat center. After studying and practicing for a long time, when they come out, their inherent and original selfish greed still hasn't been truly subdued, let alone completely eradicated. As a matter of fact, it just continues to get worse and worse. So sometimes, when we look at sentient beings in this world, it's true that most are ultimately destroyed by their own desires. This is also true in real life, whether it's ourselves or those around us. Wow, this greed is truly terrifying. It affects both our present and future lives and brings a lot of trouble and destruction to both ourselves and others. Everyone knows this as well, so such people are bound by themselves and find it hard to attain liberation. It's just like a silkworm binding itself in its own cocoon, the rope of our own discriminating thoughts. This is what ties us up so very tightly, and as a result, it makes it incredibly challenging for us to ever break free from it. He doesn't have a real case to refer to, but in reality, ordinary people are bound by three types of discriminating thoughts. One is the discriminating thought of desire, the craving for desires. Another is the discriminating thought of malice. and another is the discriminating thought of harm. In most of the sutras and treatises, the way these are described varies. But because sentient beings have these three types of discriminating thoughts, they are always being destroyed. Precisely because of this, the Buddha, in the relevant Abhidharma scriptures, elaborated on the various faults of craving and desire, and he also went on to discuss the specific desire being mentioned in this context, which brings suffering to oneself and others, and is very difficult to be liberated from. For example, in the treatise on the establishment of the truth, there is an analogy. For instance, some vicious dogs, when they start to gnaw on a bone, and as they continuously keep on gnawing, there is actually no meat on the bone, nor is there any blood present at first, but as a result of this, the bone ends up injuring their own mouths. Then, as a consequence, their own mouths begin to bleed, and when they finally taste the blood in their mouths, they become aware of it. Those foolish dogs think that, wow, it seems that the bone they're gnawing on is really especially delicious. But in fact, there is nothing at all on the bone. And yet when they taste their own blood, their immediate thought is, wow, this is a surprisingly delicious food. Actually, people in this world are the same way. They are perpetually tormenting themselves, becoming completely deceived by their own deep-seated desires. And after being so thoroughly deceived, they inevitably experience a powerful illusion, tragically mistaking this very illusion for genuine happiness and for true, unconditional love. And all across the world, all kinds of disingenuous and false words are frequently utilized to start praising the beauty of love and other similar sentiments. So to a certain degree, people do indeed praise these things and boast about them, but in reality, they are nothing more than illusions. And yet, many very intelligent people never truly discover the truth of it throughout their entire lives. This is also a rather pitiable thing. So nowadays, it truly seems that people are especially driven to pursue a multitude of things in all aspects of life, primarily because of underlying greed and a strong attachment. As a result, there are also many unreasonable phenomena that we can observe. For a clear example, we now have a common behavior online that is widely known as chasing traffic, because of mobile data traffic. Alternatively, it might be because their online click-through rate is particularly high, and as a result, some people feel encouraged to start taking on more and more extreme challenges that have already surpassed your own limits. What kind of things are these? Like jumping off a cliff, for example, or climbing up to the rooftop and starting to show off your own personal abilities to all the others around you. Some people even desperately want a large number of people to pay very special attention to them. So these kinds of extreme challenges are quite common phenomena, and sadly, many people can even end up dying during these challenges. But what is their real purpose? They use extreme challenges to gain a sense of comfort or happiness for themselves. This is also caused by a kind of greed. And then some people, in order to actually obtain the validation and approval of other people, undergo plastic surgery. And after the surgery, slowly, bit by bit, they end up disfigured. There was a woman in South Korea some time ago who was actually quite good looking before, according to the internet. But after undergoing several rounds of plastic surgery, her whole face eventually became almost like an electric fan. In the end, people online even called her the electric fan beauty. But in reality, she wasn't a beauty at all. Later, after yet another surgery, it became really quite frightening. I had actually wanted to show you all today, but as of right now, I don't know whether this equipment was working or not. So sometimes when we really take a closer look at, because of so many of the behaviors we see playing out in the world around us, it's evident that many people genuinely and truly don't have a clear realization of what the internal condition of their own hearts is actually like, or what the fundamental and true nature of greed really consists of, or what it is they're actually pursuing. When you don't know these things, you end up blindly and foolishly chasing after them in ignorance. And as for these pursuits, the truth is, none of them actually possess any kind of real meaning. There are also many people nowadays who go gambling. When gambling, at first, it's just a desire. They hear that gambling can make you a lot of money. Then, as they keep gambling, there are two possible outcomes. One is that you win and make money. And when you suddenly make a lot of money, your desire for more becomes uncontrollable. For example, if you win $100,000, you want to win another $200,000, then $300,000, and you just keep going endlessly. If you lose and don't make any money, and you lose 20, 30, or even 100,000, you think, if I gamble one more time, maybe I can win it back. Maybe you'll get it back. So you gamble again, and in the end, you ultimately end up ruined and disgraced with absolutely nothing left. Actually, when it comes down to it, all these things are very closely related to our own personal desires and attachments. They have a very strong connection. But those who can truly restrain themselves, who truly know their limits, are truly very rare in this world. Indeed, a great many people nowadays genuinely believe that the ideas of Confucius are all outdated. This is a viewpoint that a lot of people actually share. This also includes many young people nowadays. They see Confucian thought and Buddhist philosophy as teachings that suppress desire. They think we should indulge in excessive consumption and enjoy things as we please, and have many positive sounding terms for this. But in reality, these people, at first when you hear it, these terms do sound quite appealing. It really does seem like you can live freely in this world. Whether you want to travel the world or enjoy gourmet food, all of that is certainly possible. But ultimately, in the end, it is actually very difficult for them to continue living this way. Such phenomena are everywhere. So it is important to understand that many of these complex social phenomena are also explained with great clarity in this analysis. In the commentary, it says that, for example, when we have greed, if we are greedy for small things, then there's no need to even mention the bigger temptations. If we develop greed for things that are not allowed, then for things that are allowed, it's even more so. And to give you a simple example, if you find yourself becoming attached to things that are impure, then for pure things, it's even more obvious. You will find there are many such aspects discussed in detail. So it's also important to consider that there is analysis regarding the concept of desire. For example, in the Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, Nagarjuna Bodhisattva also very thoroughly explains it using various analogies. Shantideva, in the 9th chapter of The Way of the Bodhisattva, there are also explanations. But nowadays, for many of us, except for a very few who practice well, I'm afraid that the very profound meanings contained in these great sutras and treatises do not necessarily penetrate our hearts. We are generally satisfied with things that are very superficial and surface level, bits and pieces of fragmented culture. Then, just like worldly people, we keep chasing after fame and profit, pursuing gain and support. In the end, we may only bring suffering upon ourselves. So, in these respects, if we could reflect more deeply, this is what I have always believed. Indeed, more than 2,500 years ago, Shakyamuni Buddha left us these teachings and scriptures. Even now, in the 21st century, they are still remarkably vibrant and incredibly dynamic. And when compared to the perspectives of people today, they are absolutely not outdated in the slightest. They can completely reveal the various kinds of suffering and mental states within our hearts, describing them in a great amount of detail. So for us, and certainly even more so for monastics, especially for the many Buddhists, now, because they diligently study the Dharma, they have gained a great and profound hope for their lives and for their futures. They have found what is a truly genuine hope. As a matter of fact, many people often say that if they hadn't studied Buddhism back then, their lives now might not be what they are today. Fortunately, after learning Buddhism at that time, their lives now truly have genuine quality, lasting value, and a very profound sense of true meaning. A great many people actually think this way as well. And so for the next point, what I want to say is that rejoice in extinguishing delusions, constantly contemplate impurity. By doing so, one can cut off craving and attachment and free oneself from self-imposed bondage. This is the opposite of the previous verse, because earlier there was constant attachment and clinging, which ultimately made it difficult to attain liberation. Here, one must extinguish deluded thoughts and then practice the contemplation of impurity. In this way, one can ultimately attain liberation. The main point is to thoroughly discuss the faults of desire and greed, because you yourself will find that you enjoy practicing, living in some quiet and peaceful places, sincerely hoping to meditate, and then successfully extinguishing any deluded thoughts, eliminating worldly desires and discriminating thoughts. You are very much interested in this specific aspect and are especially fond of it. Then you frequently contemplate and practice the meditation on impurity, doing it continuously, not just once or twice. By regularly practicing the contemplation of impurity, you develop a mind of renunciation. Because when practicing the contemplation of impurity, as we mentioned earlier, generally regarding the impurity of the human body, there are 9 types of impurity and 36 types of impurity. This particular aspect is also mentioned in the Abhidharmakosha. It is also found in many different Shravakayana practices and in Mahayana as well. In this way, after practicing such contemplation of impurity on the human body, one can eliminate so-called attachment and desire, both towards people and things, especially the clinging attachment to people. Thus one can cut off desire. If this kind of insatiable greed is completely eliminated, whereas in the past you were so tightly bound by your many worldly afflictions, now within this you can indeed attain liberation, and then you will be living freely and at ease, enjoy the happiness of both worldly and transcendental realms. This information can be found in the Buddhist scripture known as the Udāna Sūtra, which mentions a very famous individual that many people will be familiar with, the venerable figure named Upagupta. At that time, Venerable Upagupta advised some bhikshus, and this specific account is recorded within the Udāna Sūtra. At that time, Venerable Upagupta instructed all of the monks to begin to practice the contemplation of impurity. There was a certain monk who had dedicated himself to practicing the contemplation of impurity for a very long time. As a result, he felt that his progress in this spiritual practice had become substantially good. He believed he had attained the fruit of arhatship. Then he went on to tell the Venerable Upagupta, declaring, "I want you to know that I have already fully attained the fruit of arhatship." At that particular time, the Venerable responded by saying, "It is quite probable that you have not actually attained arhatship yet. You might be experiencing what is called arrogant pride." I've heard that in a neighboring country of ours. There is a woman who sells alcohol, and she also firmly believes that she has actually attained the fruit of arhatship herself. Your own state might be very much the same as hers, so it may not be a genuine realization. When the monk heard these words, he did not immediately take a moment to pause and deeply reflect on them, whether he was truly an arhat or not. When the Venerable mentioned this woman, what he thought was, "I really should go and see her. This person is truly quite pitiful." And so, with this thought in mind, he went to look for her address, which, to put it in today's terms, he immediately went to find her. After he finally found her, when the two of them saw each other face to face, it was immediately clear that they both found each other to be quite attractive. Consequently, a strong feeling of mutual desire began to develop between them in that very moment. The woman who was selling the alcohol offered him a warm and engaging smile, and as she did, her bright white teeth were revealed. As her teeth showed, and so the monk, upon seeing her white teeth, because he had previously practiced impurity contemplation, the meditation on impurity, that habitual tendency began to resurface. Starting from her teeth, slowly, bit by bit, he extended it to her entire body. Ultimately, in his own perception, she completely transformed into a skeleton. This beautiful woman, due to the shocking condition of her teeth, immediately began to take on the appearance of a skeleton. At that moment, he completely cut off all his worldly desire and emotional attachment. As a result of this insight, he truly attained the final fruit of arhatship. So, if one practices in this way, furthermore, this is also a method of practicing the deep contemplation of impurity. This practice can truly allow not only other people, but also oneself, to genuinely attain the sacred holy fruit, and by doing so, achieve the ultimate goal of complete liberation. It seems this was in Thailand or somewhere similar. There was a monk who became an internet celebrity, a monastic. He operated online using the practice of impurity contemplation. For instance, with a person, at first you might see someone who is exceptionally attractive, but then gradually, through the process of animation, their entire body slowly decays and rots away. In the end, it really seemed as though many people actually felt a strong aversion toward the fundamental true nature of the human body, developing a deep sense of disgust. Then many people began to ordain as monks, feeling that there was nothing worthwhile in worldly life, and that a person should go to a quiet, secluded place to practice. This specific kind of renunciation began to arise in many people. They said that at that time many people were inspired and began to ordain one after another, all of them developing a profound mind of renunciation. So, in our world today, when it comes to the matter of ordination, for the path of becoming a monk, and just as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the very first thing is that you should genuinely feel that you are truly honored and very fortunate. You need to have this kind of understanding. Otherwise, monastics will always feel that they are bound by the numerous precepts and restricted by the robes they wear, while lay people, in comparison, are especially happy and free from these constraints. To have this kind of comparative mindset is likely not a very good thing. So in the present day, an increasing number of monastics can also sense that in today's society, with all kinds of especially complicated and painful phenomena occurring, they actually feel that their own identity, it's important that it be exceptionally pure, very meaningful, and content with little desire. So, when we are looking back at history, for a specific example, Master Hongyi, back then during that time, whether it was his truly extensive knowledge, his own status, or his overall family background, in every single respect, he was a person that everyone around him looked upon with a great deal of envy. However, later in his life, he made the profound choice to renounce the secular world and become a monk. Following this, he dedicated himself to entering into the most rigorous and disciplined study of the Vinaya school. When he was still a layperson, it could certainly be said that he had enjoyed a great many different pleasures, including all kinds of indulgences, the nightlife, and every kind of enjoyment. But once he gave it all up, indeed, there are all sorts of things in this world that depend on your mindset. If you can truly see through it in your heart, if you have truly understood its reality, then there is nothing left to be greedy for. Practicing the contemplation of impurity is the same way. You truly and carefully observe the structure of the human body. All the impure substances inside and outside the human body, including excrement, even something like borneol becomes an impure substance. Then what is there to be attached to? What is there to love? There are many such methods like this. When you engage in observation, the attachment and craving that exist in your mind stream can disappear completely without leaving any trace whatsoever. In this way, we may indeed be able to let go of many different things in life. Nowadays, many people talk about decluttering and letting go. As a monk, it is really necessary. Otherwise, for example, when I personally go out, I always feel burdened by too many things. For example, when the Venerable Khenpo Sodargye Lodro went out traveling, he only ever carries a simple black backpack with him. I've deliberately observed this several times. I've encountered this several times. Whether he takes a plane or a car, have a backpack with you. It's very simple inside, and to be honest, I don't know exactly what's inside because I haven't taken a close look. But from what I can see, there is only a single backpack in there. I've observed this several times. Actually, some of us, including some Buddhists, when it comes to these things, some people, when they go out, have 2 suitcases, 3 suitcases, and lots of big and small bags. You can see it when they go out too. And at home, there are also many things. It's better to gradually and gently let go more and more, perhaps step by step. Look at Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple. He had a lot of money in the world, which could fit in his wallet, but in his office, there was only a simple meditation cushion, a small reading lamp, and a laptop computer. There was nothing else present in the space. It was clean and spotless inside throughout. So I think whether we are monastics or Buddhists, sometimes we tend to keep things that are useful and things that aren't, for one reason or another. And if we accumulate all of these together, there's really no meaning to it. We should only keep what we actually truly need. And as for all the other unnecessary or useless things, especially as I mentioned earlier, nowadays with online shopping becoming more prevalent, this is one of the main causes for many people to increase their greed. Because nowadays, some young people in the world, they all shop online. And in the end, they end up owing a lot of money. There was once a person, I think it was on November 11th, 2002 at that time, Jack Ma was advertising, and she started buying things like crazy. In the end, she bought so much that she owed Y 500,000. One person, I don't know how it happened. Now, especially many young people born after the 1990s, their homes are all messy and cluttered, always filled with stuff. This really isn't actually a particularly good thing, honestly. We should try our best to filter these things out. Try to let go of these digital things nowadays. What does it mean to let go of digital things? It includes some electronic devices, whether it's computers or mobile phones. Try not to come into contact with too many of these things. If you don't use them at first, you might feel like you're going crazy, feeling as if you have no idea about everything happening in the world, as if you know nothing at all. You feel like you've been left behind by the times, that kind of feeling? But if you slowly get used to it, you'll realize that most of these things are actually unnecessary. Even in our La Runga Buddhist Academy, for example, Khenpo Sodargye, up to now, as far as we know, it said he doesn't have WeChat. He probably doesn't, right? He never gives it to us, so he probably doesn't have it. He really doesn't even actually carry a phone. This is something that's very hard to put down. Especially when a person has a lot of things going on, everyone has their own personal, sometimes messy affairs to deal with. There are also a lot of contacts and all kinds of situations. This kind of spirit is truly admirable. So I think for many people, they also accumulate more and more things around them, piling up more and more over time. This even includes digital minimalism nowadays, which might also be very difficult to achieve. If you are by yourself now, in our Buddhist Academy, we say that phones are not allowed except during special times. Generally, we don't have them. Maybe that's really the case, I guess. But no matter what, reducing is better. If we study this chapter on craving, after you finish studying it, if your desires only keep increasing, it means you haven't studied successfully. After you finish studying, try to let go of as many of your old attachments as possible. If you are able to let go, that's also very good. There's a Khenpo who is a Buddhist teacher living next door to me. We've known each other for approximately 30 or 40 years now. But basically, as a Khenpo, it's normal to have a lot of messy things piled up at home, and that's generally acceptable. But in his house, I often joke about it. I could carry away all your possessions by myself. If I carried them, there would definitely be no problem. Some people, perhaps for a long time, have very little genuine interest in worldly wealth, material possessions, or in any worldly things at all. If you feel like you're accumulating more and more of these things, that's actually quite a kind of disgrace. Didn't Andrew Carnegie himself say this very thing as well? To die wealthy is indeed a disgrace for anyone. In the end, he ultimately disposed of all of his possessions. He once said that if a person dies wealthy, that is a kind of disgrace. I see that many of us are practicing the path, but I'm not too sure myself about the situation of many lamas and nuns. I really don't know much about it. But overall, the teachings of the Buddhist scriptures still encourage us to be content and have few desires as much as possible. As was mentioned yesterday, a contented person, even lying on the ground, is still at ease and happy. This is the meaning of the Sutra of the Buddha's last teachings. It took me some time to translate these. I'm not sure if there are any major errors. Could you please point them out? Otherwise, I think I have a general understanding of the content. Fortunately, the commentary is quite good, and for the meaning of each word, I had to ponder repeatedly before I could understand it. So what does it mean? Desire is like a dark net that covers us, shrouded by craving and attachment. Being bound by such reckless heedlessness is like a helpless fish trapped in a deep cage. Here, when he talks about greed and selfish desire, it is actually quite similar to being covered by a suffocating net of pure darkness. Because this greed and desire, on the surface, it seems like you can't tell who simply has greed and who doesn't. It's not visible. It is formless and extremely dark, lacking any shape or outline. It's totally invisible. You simply can't see it at all. This formless dark net remains hidden from view. It precisely and thoroughly covers you, completely and securely binding you already. We can't tell who is affected by it. If there were actually some nets or shackles, those are things we could see with our eyes. But the net of greed and desire is truly terrifying. Even you yourself have absolutely no idea whatsoever that you are already completely bound and controlled by this insatiable greed. This kind of deep spiritual craving also envelops you entirely, just like the bright sun being covered by dark, heavy clouds. In some commentaries, there are detailed explanations about the present, past, and future as well, such as how these different times are discussed. But if you don't interpret it in terms of these three specific times, in fact, powerful craving and worldly desire itself perpetually envelops our entire consciousness continuum. We have no real idea whatsoever what lies ahead on our life path. We are completely lost and have permanently lost our moral sense of direction. The invisible ropes of dangerous heedlessness bind us extremely tightly around. What is this really comparable to? It's precisely like a struggling fish falling into a very deep, inescapable net. At first, the fish itself doesn't even realize it. Inside the fish trap, inside the fishing net, they keep jumping around constantly. But in reality, they are in fact already completely trapped. There is no hope for their liberation. So whether one is a monastic or a layperson, if one is already truly bound by the ropes of craving, it is indeed impossible for them in this life or the next to have a truly good future or in order to achieve liberation. Back then, during that period, in order to effectively tame the Shakyabhadra, the name is Shakyabhadra, isn't it? The enlightened master employed various compassionate teaching methods. In order to successfully subdue them, the compassionate Buddha took some faithful monastics to the nearby riverside at that time. When they finally arrived at the flowing riverside location, there were many young people all singing and dancing there. They were really enjoying themselves there, having a wonderful time. At the same time, what else did they actually see or notice? They saw many fish suffering greatly, trapped inside cramped cages. They also saw some young calves desperately longing for fresh milk, following along with its mother cow. After the Buddha saw these scenes, he began to recite these two verses. One is this specific verse, and the other is the following subsequent verse, because this current verse mainly uses the vivid metaphor of suffering fish being locked inside cages, or being caught by fishing nets. This is the metaphor being used here. So as for us now, actually, everyone should also be especially aware and mindful that perhaps the most serious issue now is what we commonly refer to as information anxiety. In the past, we might have had all sorts of different objects of desire that would arouse our greed and longing. For example, when you go into a store, you want to buy this, you want to buy that. If you are someone who truly loves to eat, then when you enter a food store, you might also develop all sorts of cravings. But now, what might actually be even more serious for us, in fact, mainly comes from our phones. It seems that if we don't use our phones at all, even once, there are many things we simply can't do without them. But if we do use them, they waste a significant amount of our time. The blue light from them can potentially damage our eyes and negatively impact our health and also ruin our sleep. Moreover, inside these devices, there are all kinds of algorithmic recommendations all the time. As mentioned earlier, these algorithmic recommendations will start appearing as long as we pay attention to it once or twice. All sorts of short videos will naturally be pushed to you. Then they continue to keep giving us hits of dopamine, making us feel especially happy. You see, when you watch the information you like, you just keep watching, and before you know it, I had some of my own practices today, like reciting sutras with a set amount of time for it. But before I realized it, 6 minutes had already passed. I didn't even think the time was up yet. I thought there was still time left. That's how it is. Now, whether it's people our age, for example, or other people as well, it really does bring us tremendous, difficult challenges today. And it's not just our particular group, but people all over the entire world. Sometimes when we go to the train station, everyone on the train is looking at their phones. When you go to the hospital, everyone, whether they're sick or not, as soon as they have a free moment, they start looking at their phones. Back then, many, many years ago, quite a long time ago, it must have been nearly 20 years ago, our institute didn't even have mobile phones yet. At that particular time, a local county leader, the Communist Party secretary, said that the new mobile phone network could be installed here. Khenpo Sodargye L11, and I said, for the sake of our institute's purity of discipline, thorough study and contemplation, and all aspects, we hoped it would be best not to have this system's tower here. So we didn't allow it to be installed. Then he told us at the time, the whole world has already covered by this now, you may not be able to stop it. But temporarily you can. Later, the two of us, just between us, joked in private that indeed people all over the world have already been enveloped by this demon of information. Although for now, everyone is still trying in various ways to reduce the amount of information they receive. But it's very, very difficult. Whether monastics or lay people, even those who used to be very diligent now, including some elderly people whose eyesight is almost gone, still look at a phone from far away, tears streaming down their faces on one hand, yet still desperately staring at it on the other. Those of us who drive off-road vehicles in Tibetan areas, they start video chatting while driving at the same time, which is actually extremely dangerous, but unfortunately there's really nothing we can do. This demon has already entered into the hearts of everyone, just the same. So we don't know if there's any way out. Now, many people who used to be quite diligent, those who like to meditate after getting a smartphone, they just can't do it anymore. Those who especially loved reciting scriptures or meditating, or who enjoyed listening and contemplating, and the knowledge gained from this, if it had depth, it would be fine. But most of it lacks any depth. Of course, there are a few exceptions. Some people might be working, including searching for some information or getting pushed some meaningful content. These do exist. But how many people can really put this into practice? It's hard to say for sure. So now, in this current moment, it's like we're all living with this information anxiety disorder. In one way or another, everyone is living this way. So this is also something we feel helpless about, but there's nothing we can do. Some things, even if we want to stop them right now, we are powerless to do so. So in the future, we can only go along with reality, go along with circumstances, and just see how things turn out. Those with right understanding and right mindfulness really do make a serious effort to control themselves. If you don't have right understanding and right mindfulness, your life is already being spent in an illusory virtual world. It's essentially already over. This kind of situation does indeed exist. Sometimes it's said we're like fish, like monkeys, like calves. The Buddha used all kinds of analogies. As I mentioned earlier, we're really pitiful, like fish trapped in a cage. Everyone is just holding their phones, and honestly, it's really quite pitiful to see. We all know this very well. But there are many things we feel helpless about. There's just nothing we can do. Next, being like a calf is also very pitiful, unfortunate, and helpless. If people act heedlessly, their craving grows like a creeping, entangling vine, and they inevitably follow aging and death, just like a calf seeking its mother's nourishing milk. If people act heedlessly, never guarding their sense doors day after day, not relying on right understanding and right mindfulness, but acting heedlessly, this is like a vine, a creeper. There is a type of climbing vine called the persistent Malusia vine. As long as there is a sturdy tree nearby, the determined vine will keep winding itself tightly upward along it continuously without stopping. We often use this as a very good, meaningful analogy. If the tree grows well, even the vine will climb along it, steadily soaring up into the clouds. There is such a saying. However, regarding the vine, the commentary also provides further explanation that as the persistent vine keeps growing steadily upward, it actually slowly harms the healthy tree. In the same exact way, our intense craving, this kind of destructive desire, is actually quite harmful to those who live heedlessly. This persistent vine keeps entangling you, climbing up along with you, and it is harmful to it. It is detrimental to the growth of the tree. Our heedless actions driven by desire, if we follow desire upward, are actually also quite harmful to the person themselves. So in this particular way, in the end, this kind of muddled, confused state, if it is accompanied by your craving, your desire, and your attachment, it will inevitably lead you to old age and ultimately to death. This is just like a young calf, seeking its dear mother's warm milk constantly. It's exactly the same as this touching scene. Everyone certainly knows a little calf always follows its caring mother everywhere. Why does it do this? Because it wants milk. So our attachment and greed are actually always harming you. We are all being led by the nose by our attachments and desires. So it's actually quite pitiful. Some people have no choice but to act this way, because this attachment keeps pulling you along. that there's really nothing you can do about it. It's just like a calf following its mother. This also means there's really no way out. So to sum up, as long as there is desire in this world, one can never be truly free. As it is said in Buddhism, the noble ones, arhats, pratyeka Buddhas, and bodhisattvas, have severed their attachments and desires to varying degrees. Because of this, they are deeply happy and content. Their lives are also filled with great meaning. So in the Sutra of Mindfulness of the True Dharma, it is also said, a snare only binds the body, but the net of attachment is vast and far-reaching, extending its influence in ways that are difficult to escape. A snare, which is a net made of ropes, in reality only restrains the body itself. That's what only binds the body means. And then the so-called net of attachment, in reality, it is what binds us tightly, life after life. It restrains us very significantly and severely. Though it is not a physical object, it can bind all people. This net of attachment, even though it is neither visible nor tangible, it can still bind everyone. For example, the ropes we utilize in the world, they tie up a person's entire body, just like when Ukrainians capture Russians. They tie them all up, binding them one by one with ropes. But it only ties up their bodies, and it can't actually bind anything else at all, nor can it bind everyone. But the rope of our desires, the one that we hold on to actually, even though it has no color, no form, no shape, it is able to bind everyone. This is also indeed very frightening. So in this world of ours, what is the most terrifying rope? It is the rope of greed. It can connect and bind every person, all people. And what is the most terrifying net in the world? It's not a rope net nor a computer network. These are not the most terrifying. The most terrifying are the complex nets of karma and greed. These are also very intimidating and frightening. That's the point.
Matak tambar shetang chak shetang yudeva lar tobar shepa tag deyi yangdang koran chem tsar nam driven do pchidang tsung.
Those who are attached to desires and seek pleasure through discrimination repeatedly drift in samsara's endless cycle, like restless monkeys searching for sweet fruit in the dense forest. We all have desires. Desires can be divided into those for the future, the past, and so on. For example, regarding the past, such as beautiful scenery we once enjoyed, or being with a beautiful person, and so on, these things linger in our minds. Desires for the past remain unforgettable in our hearts. As for the present, we become attached to the delightful objects before us, constantly clinging in particular and fixating on them. For the future, we strive to obtain a certain kind of happiness, and we are longing, hoping, and anticipating. Such is the nature of desire. This desire exists in the three times, past, present, and future, constantly multiplying and continuously arising. Once we have such desires, in reality, we keep drifting in the ocean of samsara within the three realms, endlessly wandering without rest. We never seem to have the real chance to truly break free and attain ultimate liberation. So it is just like a curious monkey entering a vast forest. What is this experience like? There is a story set in a certain place. Now, who was it about? It was about a Brahmin who was dedicated to the practice of impurity meditation. This Brahmin had been sitting in meditation for a total of 40 years. After those 40 years had passed, following the customs and traditions of the Brahmins, if one does not have children, it seems they cannot ascend to heaven above. So, in order to go to heaven, he went to the bustling city and first took a wife. Then he went to see the mighty king. Because generally speaking, kings are very respectful in their conduct towards Shramanas and Brahmins. This Brahmin made a humble request to the king. He asked, "Could you give me a house?" So the king graciously provided him with 100 houses. But his greed was insatiable. The king then gave him 200 houses as a generous reward. After that, the king increased his gift and gave him 1,000 houses. In the end, half of the city was eventually given to him. In the end, this man kept pushing for more. He kept asking for things without ever stopping, and the king kept giving. Meanwhile, at the same time, they saw a group of playful and curious monkeys in the dense green forest. Among them, there was one monkey who was never satisfied. It kept running around the forest in search of all kinds of fruit to eat. It started dashing back and forth, and at that very moment, the exhausted monkey fell to the ground and died instantly. So after the compassionate Buddha witnessed this tragic scene, he spoke a profound verse in response to these events. Yes, he recited this verse just now about the matter of the monkey. So, because of this monkey, in fact, it was never satisfied throughout the entire forest, despite having access to abundant food and shelter. In the end, it brought about its own death. So, for us people in the world, it's actually the same, isn't it? We're always thinking about past loves and attachments often. And even now, in this very moment, we are still holding on tightly to our attachments and acting out of greed. We also harbor our own different hopes and needs for the future. It is precisely because of these ongoing attachments and cravings that we are unable to experience true and lasting happiness. This is the very reason why the Buddha shared this verse with us. Those who continually seek pleasure head toward birth and old age. Sentient beings are bound by love, like rabbits running in a net. This refers to some foolish people who are always trying to find some happiness for themselves. But if you keep seeking happiness, the worldly pleasures we pursue are tainted and impure, and in reality, it's like taking poison. On the surface, it may seem very comfortable and joyful, but gradually you find you can't attain its true meaning. On the contrary, you actually end up heading in a different direction, into endless cycles of rebirth, being born again and again, caught in the endless cycle of samsara, from birth to old age and death. So, because of attachment, sentient beings throughout different realms and lifetimes are struck and killed in various ways, and experience all kinds of suffering. This is just like when a wild rabbit trapped in a net runs around inside the net frantically trying to escape, but only getting more entangled, just like this. This is very much like what happened a long time ago in the ancient city of Varanasi, a place of great history, when some monks went to a cemetery, or perhaps it was a charnel ground or something quite similar to that. At that time, they saw some people who were being punished by the king, with flower garlands on their heads, being executed by the executioner. At the same time, nearby, there were many wild rabbits running around in circles, desperately trying to escape, but still trapped in nets. They too were suffering. After the monks saw this scene, they began to say, "Look at this terrible sight. Clearly, these people broke the king's law, committed evil deeds, harmed innocent people, and did bad things. So if they are punished, it might be understandable and reasonable. But as for these poor, innocent wild rabbits, why are they always so suddenly trapped in the dangerous hunters' nets? They only drink pure crystal water and eat clean, fresh grass, and have not broken any laws. Why do they have to suffer such torment?" So regarding this matter, later when the Buddha heard about it, he spoke this verse. So here the main point is to say that we, as sentient beings trapped in samsara, just like these people, are actually bound by desires or by love. And once this kind of bondage begins, there is little freedom left in life. Even if you want to be free, in the end, there's nothing you can do. All kinds of causes and conditions have already shackled you, constantly trapping you. It's really very difficult. When people are led by love, there is no doubt they will die prematurely. As long as a person is drawn by love, there is no way to cut it off or put an end to it in the middle. There is completely nothing you can do about it, no matter how hard you try or how desperately you struggle. You will absolutely really feel it to the very end. We people in this world are the same. We have certain attachments and cravings in this regard. As a result, in the end, we are always stuck in the mud pit ourselves, trapped by our own desires and never able to live a truly free and unrestrained life despite our desperate efforts. Through this kind of analogy, we should also be able to clearly see these truths. Nowadays, in the modern era, many people in our world, at first, whether it's so-called love, so-called dreams, or so-called pursuits, these things all seem very meaningful. Some are driven by habits we've had since time without beginning, and there's nothing we can do about it. Some people feel that since everyone is doing these things, they themselves also think these things are very meaningful. But in the end, they realize, oh, it turns out that these things are actually not that meaningful after all. But even if you want to let go, you just can't. It's like a prisoner locked in a jail cell. At that moment, no matter how much you want to escape, you just can't. So many people in this world are indeed bound by things like love and desire, helplessly tied up by the ropes of greed completely. And in the end, even if they want to soar completely freely through the sky, they truly are powerless to do so. There's really nothing they can do. If it weren't like this, if someone were more independent and self-reliant, if they were that kind of person, then even when facing some difficulties in life, it would still be very meaningful, certainly. That day when we talked about winter and spring in our academy, regardless of whether they were Tibetan or Han Chinese, many people ended up leaving this year, and it all happened in a very short period of time, possibly in less than just half a month. Many had no choice but to leave. But when they left, I was thinking at the time, so-called monastics actually live really quite simply. Some people may have a few wooden houses, or houses with walls, but that's nothing particularly remarkable either. When it's time to leave, you just pack your things, take a few Dharma texts, grab a few Buddha statues, and go when it's time to go. Wherever you end up, you won't starve or freeze to death. It's a small blessing amid misfortune, I suppose. If you weren't a truly worldly person and didn't have to flee like a desperate refugee, wow. When we see refugees from various different countries, with elderly above and children below, bringing along relatives and friends as well as cars, horses, camels, and so on, especially when we used to go to Cambodia and Vietnam, many of their refugee camps, those camps were packed with people living in extremely harsh and overcrowded conditions. Families crowded together with no other choice at all. In the end, whole families would go to the seaside to catch fish, because aside from fishing, there was nothing else to eat. They even lived on tiny boats, the whole family together like that. But I see even monastics, after all, are still human. Sometimes they encounter hardships, adverse conditions, and obstacles. These things do happen, but in the end, there is still a certain degree of freedom in many aspects. So, regarding this so-called net of attachment mentioned here, in fact, the Buddha describes it with different meanings in various sutras. There are different interpretations. Some of us now don't really take the time to truly and deeply reflect on ourselves. What is the root cause of the things we are most deeply attached to? We should make a list, something like that, just to be thorough. For example, consider all your personal belongings and everything that in this very life you are most deeply attached to. What exactly is it? You can ask and answer. If you do this self-questioning, some might say, what I am most attached to is my Dharma texts. Some might say, I am most attached to my car. Some people say, these days it's best not to have a car otherwise. If you're really emotionally attached to your car, you'll have to give it up completely in 2 months, which is also a difficult and painful thing to do. Some people might be most attached to their house. For some, it could be that they are most attached to their personal belongings or blessed objects. There are people like that too, right? So from this, we can also see the root of our attachment and our desire and what it truly fundamentally is.
Chipayin the Pi Semtak, Semchin Tag, Chitong Chiman Tagla, Semchak Yang, Kun Jur, Rola Gavi, Shibar Nam, Yangda Yander, Dungur Tobran Yer.
Beings who are bound by strong attachment, clinging persistently to both existence and non-existence and foolishly delighting in various flavors, repeatedly experience all kinds of suffering in their lives. He says that many sentient beings are bound by attachment, and these beings who are bound by attachment and desire, in fact it is attachment to both existence and non-existence. As for existence, existence refers to the 3 realms of existence: the form realm, the formless realm, and the desire realm. The 3 realms, in reality, are fundamentally a kind of philosophical view that falls into the extreme of eternalism. So, many sentient beings in the 3 realms are also attached to the aspect of existence. There are also beings who are attached to non-existence. Non-existence means that after death there is nothing at all. This falls into the extreme of nihilism. Because of this attachment, you feel that nothing exists, that everything is empty, that nothing matters, and so on and so forth. There is also this kind of emotional attachment. No matter what, people really like the taste of knots. Knots refer to the 9 types of knots, which means afflictions, wealth, sensual pleasures, and so on in life. In the Abhidharmakosha, there are 9 types of knots. As I see in the entering the middle way, the 3 types of knots mentioned earlier, a knot is a kind of bondage which binds the mind and creates suffering, also called an affliction. So, these foolish people who are fond of the taste of afflictions, again and again, repeatedly, end up experiencing all kinds of suffering. That's why, in this world, there are many deeply ingrained and fundamentally flawed mistaken ways of thinking that persist endlessly. In reality, these things do not truly exist. But when we truly become attached, these pitiable sentient beings spend their entire days with false feelings and pretenses, taking things that are unreal as if they were real in your mind, and then experiencing suffering and being tormented because of this. So they become more attached to these afflictions, and more attached to these things, gradually becoming even more involved. In this way, the suffering in their hearts never ceases. The fire of desire arises in the heart, yet the deluded call it cool and refreshing. This means that those whose hearts are burned by the attachment of love regard all these deluded phenomena as something pure and entirely untainted. How pitiable it is. Sentient beings are so deeply and thoroughly deluded. Those who have studied a bit better, who have practiced a bit more diligently, naturally develop a sense of compassion for sentient beings. Why is that? Because so many sentient beings do not know the true nature of their own minds. So many sentient beings have no idea what is truly meaningful in our lives as humans. What is it that actually has real significance? They will take some time to contemplate this deeply. As a result of this reflection, they will ultimately come to realize and understand its real meaning. All right, we will stop here for today.
Om